This divide is going to show why these two sides will never agree. Well, falling on Rotten Tomatoes' list of most popular streaming documentaries for 2022 is Matt Walsh's movie, What is a Woman? Has a 97% audience score, so it's being viewed very favorably by the audience, yet it has no critic reviews, and that happens to be because of the subject matter that Matt Walsh covers here in this documentary, where he addresses the question of modern gender ideology. What is a woman? How do we define these terms? Now, this movie is behind a paywall at the Daily Wire, so I want to answer the question of, is it worth your time for watching? And also, this movie exposes what is the philosophical divide between those who believe in modern gender ideology and those who espouse more of a conservative historical view. And this divide is going to show why these two sides will never agree. There's no amount of debate that they can do when they're divided in the manner that they are. Well, this is Jason for Soulfire. Here in this channel, we want to offer gospel hope for a porn-filled world and help you live a life of integrity. Well, the premise for this movie is Matt Walsh asking the question of what is a woman and exploring modern gender ideology. So here's the tagline from the film. It says, "It's the question you're not allowed to ask. The documentary they don't want you to see." Join Matt Walsh on his often comical yet deeply disturbing journey as he fearlessly questions the logic behind a gender ideology movement that has taken aim at women and children. Now, I can agree with that assessment. It is disturbing at times. It also is comical. Matt Walsh has a very dry sense of humor, so there are parts of this documentary that are really pretty funny. And what he does, and I think it was a good idea, is he interviews a college professor of women's studies. He interviews a psychologist, a surgeon who does gender treatment, gender surgery, a psychologist, an abortionist, and then a number of other folks on the street that he just asks these questions and interviews. And I think that was smart, because even here in the documentary, some of the interviewees say that he emailed them the questions in advance. So it didn't strike me as a sort of gotcha where he's trying to trick them and get in an interview and then ask them really hard questions. Yet even so, in some of these interviews, even though his questions seemed fairly mild, a number of the interviewees were triggered. One walked out on him. The college professor, there was a scene that went viral, and I'll play that for you now. Watch as this college professor gets triggered by a certain word.
We're talking about gender and sex, and there's a lot of controversies there. If we're talking about a trans woman has all of the male physical characteristics, so would that not be a male then? Couldn't we plainly say this person is a male?
Well, I guess it's like, why are you asking the question? I think I want to understand sort of why that's so important. So if someone tells
Just
you...
to sort of understand reality, you know?
Well, I mean, I think when someone tells you who they are, you should believe them. So if a person says that they're a woman or they're a man, then that's them telling you their gender is. I'm not so sure what social interactions would have to do with maleness or femaleness that would be.
I'm not even talking about social context. I'm just trying to start by getting to the truth, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of like getting to the truth. Again, in social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
If I probe about what the truth is?
You keep invoking the word truth, which is condescending and rude. I'm saying to you.
How is the word truth condescending and rude?
Why don't you tell me what your truth is? And you're walking on 30 seconds more of thin ice before I get up.
And so there you have it, a college professor saying that the word truth is condescending and rude because it goes against his ideological viewpoints. And see, your reaction to this documentary is really going to depend on how much you have been paying attention to this modern gender ideology movement, if you've been keeping up with it, if you're familiar with a lot of these terms. If not, a lot of this is going to be new. A lot of it's going to be quite confusing. I feel like I've read and heard a lot about this over the last few years, so there wasn't a ton in this documentary that I found all that surprising. So, for example, we saw in politics this week, it's July of 2022, an example in the Senate where there was a Senate committee hearing where University of California Berkeley Law professor Khiara Bridges used the term people with the capacity to get pregnant instead of the word woman. Now, some of the senators asked her more questions, tried to push back on that and say, hey, are you talking about women? And she continued to use the term people with capacity to get pregnant. Here we see the divide. Here we see the reason that this film, this documentary was made to try to answer the question of what is going on, that even the word woman is something that people are unwilling to say. And this is the ideological divide that we must understand that this documentary exposes. One side believes that there is objective truth, that there's objective reality, and that reality and truth is true regardless of what you believe or how you feel. So for example, if you step on a scale and that scale says 200 pounds, you weigh 200 pounds regardless of how you feel about it. Even if you would say, listen, I really feel like I'm 165, I'm in my prime, I don't weigh 200 pounds. Well, objective reality and that scale is saying, hey, that is not accurate, that is not true. But the other side believes truth and reality is defined by that individual. This is why Matt Walsh in his interviews is never going to find a point of common ground. So for example, the professor asks him, why don't you tell me what your truth is? The psychologist, who's the abortionist, who wants to give hormone pills to children, says, whose truth are we talking about, yours or the children? And so you see this divide that they don't even view truth as the same. In this view, you step on the scale and you can weigh whatever you want to weigh. But you see, this viewpoint that everyone has their own truth has tremendous implications, from women's sports and who can play women's sports, to surgery and hormones for children. Do we allow children to dictate the things we put in their body, the surgical procedures that they will have? And this is where you see some of the tension in this film, where Walsh asks a psychologist about the hormones and the pills that she is giving to children. She really gets a little bit triggered by that, doesn't want to talk about, doesn't like the use of the term drug. She wants to refer to it as medication.
One of the drugs used is Lupron, right? Which has actually been used to chemically castrate sex offenders?
You know what? I'm not sure that we should continue with this interview because it seems like it's going in a particular direction.
Well, you're a medical professional.
I am a medical professional.
So you don't want to talk about the drugs that you give to kids, or?
Again, I'm a physician and I use medication. You're choosing exploitive words. Drugs I give to kids.
I'm choosing a
chemical
word
castration.
that was in a dictionary.
That's not a correct term for puberty blocking and
I could look.
Because here we have this viewpoint, and this is what she says, that you can pause puberty at any time, and then you can restart it at any time without any sort of consequences. Now, if you've ever taken a prescription pill, if you've ever if you've ever read the giant printout that comes with the pills, you'll see a number of potential side effects. And yet here we are hearing that you can give kids hormones with no side effects. Now, I find that hard to believe, and the documentary explores some of that and even talks to some people who were on these hormones. But what's interesting is we have not been following this idea that you will allow children to choose their medications and their surgical procedures in a number of other arenas. Now, let me give you an example. The best example would be a case of anorexia. So God forbid, 14-year-old girl is starving herself. She's anorexic. She believes that she's fat. Will you affirm her beliefs, tell her that her belief that she is fat is true, even if she is dangerously thin and unhealthy? Will you prescribe her the diet pills that she's asking for? Will you pay for and allow her to have liposuction surgery to get her physical body to match her feelings and her reality? Well, historically, we have said no. We've tried to help these people come to an understanding of what is true in reality and get them the nourishment and the food and the nutrients that they need to survive. But you see, this issue of truth and what is truth is especially important for Christians as well, where the scripture tells us that Jesus is the truth, where God has given us a warning of judgment and eternal consequences for rejecting his truth, and that is true regardless of how you feel about it. So if we throw truth out the window, a lot is at stake and a lot will be lost, and I think that's one of the reasons that Matt Walsh decided to make this film. You see, if you stand on a train track and a train is coming, when that train meets your body, the impact there doesn't care what you believe about trains and what you believe about realities. Truth is truth. And so one of the things that the film does a really good job is it explores the origins and the history of the modern gender ideology movement. Where did it start? And there's really two people he goes into detail about, John Money and Alfred Kinsey. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of that. That is a video for another time, but it is especially important for you to understand the roots of it. What did these men believe? What were the experiments that they did on children? Some of the disturbing things that they then put into the educational system that is being taught to our children and fed to our educational system today. So should you watch this film? Well, I would say yes. I do believe that it is worth it. For you to understand the ideological divide that is taking place in our country and in our world today, you can decide for yourself, what do you believe about truth? What do you believe about reality? What choices will you make for your children? What choices will you make when it comes to education or higher institutions of learning, degree programs that kids can choose in college? You see, the scripture says that God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. But the modern gender ideology throws that out, and it says, we will decide that we are God. We will say who we are, what we are. We can define it for ourselves. So what is behind this push? Well, let me encourage you, check out my video on how many genders there are, which goes into the philosophical roots. There's one particular thing that is driving this movement of modern gender ideology, and if you espouse to that, it's going to lead you to side with them. So check out this video. I'm going to link that here. And also let me know in the comments if you've seen this video. What'd you think? Do you recommend it? Are there other documentaries that you recommend? This is Jason for Soulfire. Like this video if it was helpful. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will catch you in the next one.